Welcome, Wine Vault Bistro. My name is Markus Bokisch, and
I'm Liz Bokisch.
we're the owners of Bokisch Vineyards. This would have been the 11th year that we would be hosting winemaker dinners at the Wine Vault Bistro, and so sadly, because of COVID, we can't do it, but we can bring you out to our own very vineyard. So first of all, hats off to Chris and Mary Gluck, as well as to Chef Greg for putting all this together.
Yes, we're excited to be part of it, even in a virtual way. So we're going to take you through our three wines that are going to be paired with the dinner tonight. We've got our Albarino, our Tempranillo, and our Graciano, as Markus said. We're here in our original vineyard that we planted these varieties, and we're going to talk and walk you through the vineyard.
So the very first variety we're going to take a look at is the Albarino, which is the first you're going to taste. Then we're going to go to the Tempranillo, and we're going to end up with the Graciano. So come with us. Now, many years ago, there was a handful of you who came to our household and had a beautiful dinner in our backyard. So some of you may remember that scene.
Yes.
But for those of you who haven't had the benefit of coming over to our estate vineyard, here we are. So what you can see right here is our very first row of Albarino. And Liz, if I could have you hold the glass so that I can show a little bit what's going on.
Absolutely.
Albarino is a variety that comes from Galicia, which is the northwestern corner of Spain, where it rains like it does in Germany. They'll get 50 inches of rain every year. And so there's a lot of mildew and fungus that can grow on plants because of that high humidity environment. So the variety Albarino has, over time, become a very wispy plant that allows the air to breathe through it to dry up any rainfall. So here we have it in kind of a short-statured variety, but in Galicia what they do is they grow it on granite posts that go about 6 to 7 feet up in the air, and they trellis the vines way high up where it's windier. And then again, you have these really wispy canes, long internodes, small little leaves that like to flutter in the wind and get that rain off. And then you have these little tiny clusters. They're like a little hand grenade. Like if you just ball up your fist, that's what an Albarino looks like, as opposed to, for example, a Zinfandel, which is huge, or a Tempranillo. So if you get a little bit closer here, you'll notice that we have a cluster that is just going through flowering. And if you look really closely, you can see all the little tiny pistils that are going around the ovary. And so you'll see a little bit of the pistils that fall into my hand. So this is right at the time of flowering. Now, if we got a really bad rain right now, we would lose the flowers and we get a lot of what's called shatter, and the clusters would look really even smaller. But hopefully we're not going to get a whole bunch of rain in the next couple of weeks, 3 weeks. As these things grow, again, they get into about a bit of a hand grenade kind of closed fist look. And the berries tend to have a really thick, what they call cuticle, which is a waxy layer on the surface of the skin. And that's really important because it also helps fight against mildews and molds that you would find in a high rain environment like Galicia. Fortunately, we don't have those conditions here in Lodi, but we have found that Lodi is a unique and ideal area to grow Albarino. And we were the first to bring it here, but since then, there's over 13 different wineries in Lodi alone that are growing a varietal Albarino, and it's becoming one of the most popular up-and-coming varieties in not only California, but all over the United States.
So here we have some of the Albarino right here. This is our Terra Alta Vineyard Albarino that you're going to be enjoying with the meal. It's going to go perfect with the gazpacho and the halibut. So you're going to have it with both of those courses today. And as you know, Chef Greg and Chris spend a lot of time doing their tasting notes and pairing the food with the wine year after year. So the Albarino is stainless steel fermented. It's got a really beautiful crisp acidity, nice citrus and lemony flavors, and it's going to cut through that roundness of the halibut perfectly with the meal. So I think you're going to enjoy it. So.
Yeah, and I think another really interesting thing about the Albarino is that we actually grow it in 4 different vineyards on 4 different terroirs or different soils and climatic regimes. This is the original vineyard, and this one tends to have slightly different aromatics than the other 3 do. For example, we also get, aside from the citrus component, we'll get some nice dried apricot fruit, get a little bit of pear. It gets really just very complex for a white wine. even though it's seen mostly stainless steel and just a little bit of neutral oak.
So off to the next course, which is paella. And as you guys know, paella is a very famous rice dish all throughout Spain. In fact, where our family comes from is one of the rice growing regions very near Valencia. There's a huge delta of the Ebro River where Marcus's family lives. And so paella is one of the most famous foods that you can have. Seafood or meat paella, rabbit or vegetarian. So you're going to be enjoying the paella with our Tempranillo. And right on this side of me is the Tempranillo vineyard. So Marcus is going to talk about the difference between Tempranillo and Albarino.
Yeah, and one thing that I wanted to mention is, outside of the fact that Spain is a rice growing region, and our region in particular is that's the focus. My grandfather on one side of the family was actually a rice farmer, and on the other side of the family he was a rice shipper on boats that would take rice all over Spain. So paella is deep and dear in our hearts, and we love the dish and we do it often. So now let's take a quick look at the differences between Albarino and Tempranillo. If you look straight down this row, you'll notice here, all grapevines might look alike to the undiscerning eye, but if you look here, the Albarino is a little bit more advanced. It's a white variety that tends to grow a little faster. The Tempranillo is a couple weeks behind. It's a little bit shorter. Also, if you look at the leaves, the Albarino has this really round leaf right here. And that's a pretty big sized Albarino leaf. This is a Tempranillo leaf, completely lobed. You can see the deep lobing all through the leaf structure. The back of it is different too. The Tempranillo tends to be a little shinier with a little bit less hairiness to it. The Albarino has a lot of hairiness, a lot of white tuft hairiness to it, which helps repel droplets of water. The Albarino comes from a very wet growing region like we talked about earlier. The Tempranillo comes from a high elevation continental climate in the middle of Spain. So it adapted and evolved in a very different manner. So if you look at the Tempranillo, you'll notice that the leaf I pulled, similar to the size of Albarino, well, this is an immature leaf. Let me show you a more mature leaf. That's a more mature leaf. Imagine the size difference between a mature Tempranillo leaf and a mature Albarino leaf. Imagine the lobe difference, like the length of the stems. They're completely different plants, which is really exciting. And then, if you look at a cluster, right now, these clusters haven't flowered yet, but you can take a look at the size difference of this versus what we looked at earlier. Here's the Albarino cluster, here's a Tempranillo cluster. These berries are going to be a lot bigger. The architecture of the stem is a lot longer. This cluster is going to be roughly about this big by the time that it's completely ripe. The beauty of Tempranillo, and I think the secret to really good Spanish wines, is the longevity of wines that this variety can make. You can put a Tempranillo away. In fact, we've tasted our 2001, our very original vintage, and it's tasting delicious and vibrant today. And that's part of the reason why we decided to do a Gran Reserva, which is a multi-year aged wine in the cellar. So instead of releasing the most current vintage, we actually take some of our Tempranillo, reserve it in the cellar, hold on to it for 5 years before release, so people can see the ageability of Tempranillo. It's really hard to age your wines at home for most people. We'll do it for you. So again, this is the Tempranillo right here, but it's not just any Tempranillo. Just like the Albarino, we brought this budwood over from Spain, personally selected it from an area called Ribera del Duero, which is just north of Madrid, high continental climate, and it has really proven to be one of the most exceptional and most interesting clones of Tempranillo currently in California.
Another thing I wanted to point out, since we're standing here in the vineyard, is you see all the grass on below me. So we have a 100% cover crop right here. This is an organically farmed vineyard, as well as the Terra Alta vineyard. It's all organically grown, organically certified. So we take pride in that. Behind me in the distance, down this very row, you can see solar panels back there. So we have solar energy as well. And so we do as much as we can to do our part for the environment during our stewardship of the land. So Okay, so we're in our Tempranillo block. We're showing you the Albarino block, and now we're going to show you our Graciano block, which is really, really special and unique because we were the very first people to ever plant Graciano in the United States and the very first to bottle it up. So it's a real important variety for us, and you guys are very special to be able to have the opportunity to taste it because it's almost never bottled by itself, and so it's almost always used as a blender in the Tempranillos of the Rioja. And so we're going to take you down there so you can see our secret Graciano block.
Yeah, in fact, the very first vintage of Graciano we ever made, and I should actually say, the only reason we brought Graciano back into the country, is because we wanted to use it as a blending component to the Tempranillo, because some of the best Tempranillos out of Spain, out of the Rioja, use Graciano as their secret weapon. And so we decided that that's what we wanted to do. But after we planted it and grew it, we realized, oh my God, this is a standalone variety. There's only a handful of people in Spain that use it as a varietal wine. But in California, its expression is phenomenal. So we decided to create our own Graciano, as well as using it as a blending component to our Tempranillo. Now, Graciano is a bit of a problem child. It tends to be very, very late in breaking bud, so it's behind other varieties. Like if you can compare, here's the Albarino now to the left, and then over here you have the Graciano, which is much more short-statured. It's easily 3 weeks behind, if not a month behind the Albarino before it's ready to harvest. Also, you'll notice that whereas here at the Albarino you have this uniform height, everything is growing really well all the way down. The Graciano tends to have some long shoots, some short shoots, some longer shoots and shorter shoots. It's really uneven. It's considered to be one of the oldest varieties from the Iberian Peninsula, and it is genetically somewhat unstable. It hasn't been selected as much as some other varieties for its area of growing. It's thought to have been the variety that was used by the ancient Iberians even before the Romans. So pre-Roman, we're talking well over 2,000 years ago. This is what they would make their wines from. The clusters are really funny because they tend to be big like the Tempranillo, but the seeds, the pips, are huge. And I remember the very first year that Elise, our winemaker, was making our wines for us. At the time of pressing out the juice, she heard what sounded like thousands of marbles rolling around in the tank, and it was all the seeds that had settled to the bottom of the tank. So people who aren't used to this variety will discover a lot of weird things about it. One thing is its architecture and how it grows. The other thing is that it tends to be really lacking in uniformity. Some clusters are ahead in sugar than others, and so a good grower has to reduce and remove all of the green fruit that's behind so you have more uniformity in ripeness. That translates to lower yields, and lower yields translates to more costly farming per unit, but it's the ultimately what you get from it is just gold. It's one of my favorite varieties.
You'll be able to taste it in the glass yourself, and also paired with the chuletón steak, it's going to be amazing. This wine can really hold up to some bigger dishes, bolder flavors. Also really good with lamb, but tonight you're gonna absolutely enjoy it. Also, it's a very good aging wine as well, as we've discovered. In the beginning, we had no idea how long it was gonna age, and this wine can last a good 20 years or more. We don't even know. This vineyard we planted in 1999, so we're just getting there to 20 years of making it. So we're kind of in this together.
Yeah. We have one story that we told a few years ago over at the Wine Vault Bistro that I'd love to talk about, which is one time Liz and I were traveling through the Rioja, and we went to see this producer called Contino, who is one of the top-notch chateaus of the Rioja that makes phenomenal wines. And after a very lengthy tour of the cellar and tasting through the barrels and whatnot, he said, "Come with me, I want you to see my personal cellar." And so we went working our way through these old tunnels all the way to the most ancient part of the cellar that dated to the 12th century, and he pulled out a bottle of our 2004 Graciano.
It was such a shock. We were like, our mouths just dropped open.
Yeah, we had no idea we were on his radar. And then he said, "I've been following you. You know, who is doing Graciano in California of all places? Well, now it turns out quite a few people are starting to do Graciano all over the Central Coast, Lodi, the Sierra foothills. It's been a really exciting evolution for this variety.
So again, we really welcome you for tonight's dinner at the Wine Vault Bistro. 11 years running. We're wishing we could be there with you guys tonight. We always have so much fun, and so I'm really excited that we've been inventive and figuring out new ways to handle our new reality. And hats off to you guys.
Yeah,
cheers
hats off.
to you.
Salud.
Salud, and we hope to see you next year for 12 years of dinners together.
In 20